Annie, bienvenue, welcome. Welcome to Massey College. My name is Nathalie de Rosiers and I'm the principal of Massey College. It's my great honor to welcome you here for this very important day. Welcome to the United for Justice, War Crimes Against Ukrainian Children, a conversation between governments, civil society, on efforts to ensure accountability. I first want to recognize that Massey College is built on Indigenous lands, the lands of the Rwanda, the Haudenosaunee, and it is the treaty land of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We want to acknowledge our duty of stewardship toward this land, and also the great privilege that we have to be here. So welcome to Toronto, welcome to this very important day where we reflect on accountability. And I want to say we have many people that are online. For our online viewers, please let us know when you are joining from today, where you are from, if you want to put that in the chat. This conference is a partnership between the Massey College, the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, the Office of the Prosecutor General, Global Affairs Canada, and the Embassy of Ukraine in Canada. And I am very grateful to Payam Akhavan, who's the Massey Chair of Human Rights, for bringing this conference to Massey College. Massey College's mission is to nourish learning and serve the public good. And I hope that we will nourish you a bit further, but in our mission to serve the public good, we try to have spaces for important conversations with our junior fellows, that many of them are here, to demonstrate how it is to be an engaged intellectual in the world. So we are particularly happy to have all of you that will inspire them to continue to do the good work for years to come. So it's my great pleasure first to introduce to you someone who needs no introduction in Canada, Irwin Cotler, who is the International Chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. He's an emeritus professor of law at McGill University. And he is a former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, a longtime member of Parliament, someone who has inspired us all. We're so happy to have you, Professor Cotler, here, leading parliamentarian on the global stage, been the chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Group for Human Rights in Iran, Inter-Parliamentary Groups for Justice for Sergei Magnitsky, chair of All Parties Say of Darfur, chaired of the Canadian section of the Parliamentarian for Global Action and member of its International Council. And I've known Professor Cotler for many years, and I am actually so happy that you are able to join us. I think it's the beginning of a good relationship and a good partnership with the Raoul Wallenberg Center. Irwin Cotler.
Merci, Nathalie. And the most important part of your remarks is our friendship over the years and our working together dans la cause commune, une common cause. Chers amis, friends, je voudrais d'abord souhaiter une chaleureuse bienvenue à tous et à toutes. And I want to, in particular, express our appreciation to our partners who have come together to convene not only this timely and important, but I would say urgent conference, and to Professor Nathalie Rosiers, Massey College, Professor Payam Akhavan, who's in a dual role here, both at Massey and as the Canadian co-chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center, for inspiring this conference. Justice for Ukraine is not just the title of this conference. It is, in a word, a clarion call to action. Action for justice for the Ukrainian people, for accountability for the human rights violations, accountability of human rights violators for their war crimes, crimes against humanity, and mass atrocities constitutive of the act of genocide. This is not a word that I use lightly or easily, but as our Raoul Wallenberg Center showed in a landmark report, Russia has been engaged in a standing incitement to genocide, which is itself a standalone breach of the Genocide Convention, let alone the mass atrocities themselves constitutive of the act of genocide, and of the forced abduction and deportation and effectively disappearance of children, the most vulnerable of vulnerable, and the worst of mass atrocities. In a word, this is a clarion call on behalf of our common humanity. It is not simply a response to a criminal act of aggression between European powers within Europe. This is an assault, a foundational assault on the rules-based international order, a foundational assault on the UN Charter, a foundational assault, as I said, on our common humanity. We must therefore heed the call to action, and we must act with a sense of urgency that it warrants on behalf of the Ukrainian people, on behalf of justice for the Ukrainian people, in holding those accountable for these mass atrocities, and thereby securing and preserving our common humanity. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Cotler, for inspiring us and setting us straight for the rest of the day. It is really now my great pleasure and great privilege to introduce to you who will be speaking to us as well from
Ladies and gentlemen, first let me thank you all for organizing and participating in this event. It is really important to address the dire issue that Russia unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children has caused. Since 2014, we have all heard about the devastating consequences of the war on Ukrainian kids. And since February 2022, Ukrainian boys and girls have been massively deported or forcibly transferred. But they are also subjected to a myriad of other international crimes. Children enjoy special protections under international humanitarian and human rights law, and we must ensure accountability for those crimes. Let me touch on three key elements for our reflection in today's conference. First, investigation and prosecution of crimes against children. Second, protecting children through cooperation and collaborations. And three, with participation of children in justice. Now, I'll turn specifically to each of these points. So, investigation and prosecutions. All crimes against children and affecting them are grave crimes. The all-out Russians' outlaw invasion of Ukraine in 2022 has led to widespread and systematic crimes against and affecting minors. The extent, scope, and scale of these crimes will be determined over time. But the fact we have already qualified for diversity of the war crimes and crimes against humanity, and possibly genocide. Among these, the forcible deportation has been a key priority for the OPG and rightly attracted the most international attention and condemnation. Beyond deportation, however, many other crimes have been documented in Ukraine. Among them are killings, sexual violence, attacks on schools and hospitals, and recruitment and use of children to wage war. Just yesterday, we were lucky to bring back a 70-year-old boy who's been deported and got enlistment summon. But we are 100 more. It means that we need to consider all war-related violence against children, including the one directly perpetrated against children, and also the entirety of the violence affecting children across Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In this regard, we need to better address how minors are disproportionately affected by war-related violence. Besides, we need to ponder on the most efficient strategies to protect children against this lasting violence. We need to investigate and document all these crimes in a holistic manner. Second, we need to discuss how to better protect and repatriate children. In terms of cooperation and collaborations, the government of Ukraine is taking its responsibilities on the protections of the deported children. Through collective efforts, together with non-governmental organizations, Ukrainian authorities have secured the return of 387 children from Russia and from territories it has occupied. We were aware that this is not enough, and we remain steadfast in our efforts to return all the children. To this end, we need the international community's support and lasting collaboration with non-governmental organizations. A number of initiatives are ongoing to scale up our efforts to find systematic solutions. Among them is development of the mechanism to return and reintegrate deported and forcibly transferred children. Thirdly, we need to discuss children's participation in justice. Minors are not just the future adults. They are the present. Boys and girls of all ages are bearing the brunt of cruelty of war. They are victims of horrible crimes, and they are witnesses all types of violence destroying their environment. It includes murdering of their parents and siblings, deportation of their friends, the destruction of schools, the forcible displacement of their communities, and so much more. Boys and girls are individuals that have special set of rights that everyone should protect, enable, and guarantee. One of their rights and main principle enshrined in international and domestic law is their rights to participate. In our context, we conclusion and sample where need to support children participation in justice. We are not united if children are not at the table with us. They should participate in matters that are important to them. And we need to create the spaces for their participations. We need to allow their views and perspectives to influence our policies and strategies. And it must be mindful. Let me finish by strengthening our commitment to seek and develop innovative ways to address crimes against and affecting children. To do it, we need our friends and allies' help. We need international champions, and we need the civil society's aid to implement solutions for the meaningful justice for child victims of international crimes. We Ukrainians are grateful to Canada for convening this discussion and playing this role. We welcome your leadership, and we are really appreciated your support for Ukrainian children in their quest for justice. Thanks for your attention. Slava Ukraini!
coming out here. Can I unmute her? It's something to do.
I'm gonna check online if it's working.
As Member of Parliament, Mr. Kostin represented Ukraine in the trilateral contact group at the negotiations with Russia. Mr. Kostin.
Thank you, dear Nathalie. Dear Minister Joly, Minister Virani, Commissioner Reynders, Ambassador Rosiers, respectful ambassadors, respectful members of the audience. It seems symbolic that today, as Canada, along with the world, celebrates Child Day, we open the 5th United Justice Conference dedicated to the atrocities taking place in Ukraine, with particular focus on the Ukrainian children, who are unfortunate victims of the international crimes committed by Russian Federation. We have launched United for Justice framework in March this year with a comprehensive conference in Lviv that brought together leading experts, decision makers, and supporters of Ukraine to establish a web of accountability for atrocities committed by Russia in Ukraine. This was followed by 3 thematic conferences dedicated to massacre in Bucha, conflict-related sexual violence, and crimes against natural environment. In past 634 days of full-scale war, we have witnessed the true face of Kremlin's criminal regime with full brutality that cannot mask the scale of atrocities and systemic targeting of civilian population, summary executions, torture, and ill treatment, conflict-related sexual violence, indiscriminate shelling of schools and hospitals, arbitrary detention of thousands of civilians in war camps, and forced deportation of over 90,000 Ukrainian children continue as we speak. In this war, children are the most vulnerable, losing their protected and secure environment, becoming exposed to and affected by all aspects of armed conflict. Most importantly, the forced displacement of Ukrainian children takes place on scale and speed not seen after Second World War. It is impossible to remain gracious and composed when you witness how the Russia implements its persecution policy by targeting Ukrainian children, the essence of our future. We all know, justice delayed is justice denied. And when Russia forcibly displaced Ukrainian children to Russia, strips them from Ukrainian names, identity, and nationality, forcing them into the adoption processes along with the so-called Russification programs, we all need to act rapidly and urgently. We shall not allow Russia to weaponize time in their favor. It has done it far too long, for decades remaining unaccountable for its crimes and breaches of the international law. Let us also remain mindful of the fact that the war in Ukraine is a total war, where we are fighting not only for our sovereignty, statehood, and Ukrainian identity, but for the world order, peace, and stability. We see the United for Justice Conference as a timely event where, together with decision makers, politicians, and experts, we will not only discuss present-day situation, but shape our future responses, and if necessary, design new mechanisms that will make headway to tangible initiatives for securing Russia's responsibility. Result of failure is too expensive. Let me also use this opportunity to express our gratitude to Canada and Canadian people for standing with Ukraine and Ukrainian people. Since the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine in 2014, Canada has been at the forefront in condemning Russia's violation of the international law and UN Charter, while expressly supporting our sovereignty and territorial integrity including the non-recognition of the military occupation and annexation of Crimea and occupation of the eastern regions of Ukraine. Ukraine deeply values Canada's unwavering stance and assistance throughout past 2 years in political, military, financial, and humanitarian spheres, for strongly condemning the unprovoked and unjustified act of aggression by Russia against Ukraine and taking up measures to exclude Russia's membership in the international institutions and organizations, be it the initiatives voiced and supported in United Nations General Assembly, Arctic Council, ICAO, Interpol, or G20. Thank you for joining the core group of states supporting the establishment of special tribunal for the crime of aggression, as well as the register of damage that will gather claims for reparation of the damage and loss caused by Russian aggression. We recognize and appreciate Canada's financial support to the International Criminal Court, a leading international criminal justice mechanism tasked with the investigation of the international crimes committed in Ukraine. As early as April of last year, Parliament of Canada adopted resolutions recognizing the crimes committed by Russian Federation as a genocide against Ukrainian people. We are equally grateful for the resolutions acknowledging the deportation of Crimean Tatars as genocide, condemning the pseudo-referendums in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, and designation of the Wagner Group as a terrorist organization. It's a well-known fact that Canada has been a pioneer state, passing legislation last June that provides for the confiscation of the Russian assets and their repurposing for rebuilding Ukraine, for restoring international peace and security, for compensating the victims and survivors. You're also a strong partner in introducing and upholding sanctions regime against over 2,600 individuals and entities. Last but not least, Canada co-leads point 4 of the Ukraine Peace Formula, dedicated to return of forcibly deported Ukrainian children and civilians, as well as release and repatriation of the prisoners of war. These efforts not only exemplify Canada's genuine commitment, but also reinforce and sustain our quest for justice and accountability. Lastly, let me also use this opportunity to express our profound gratitude to our Canadian partners, the Massey College and the Raoul Wallenberg Center for the Human Rights, for co-hosting this event along with us and the Embassy of Ukraine in Canada. We are grateful to all speakers, participants, and invitees to their presence and engagement. By being here, you stand with Ukraine, with the victims and survivors of this war. Therefore, I wish you all to be brave in your actions and in your efforts as we act united in Ukraine for global peace, stability, and security. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kostin. Thank you for your words, and thank you for setting the agenda for today in terms of our reflections, and the reasons why we are here today is to really move forward and try to have an intelligent and a way in which to imagine what could be done in the next little while, and what are the institutional responses that need to be imagined to respond to the depth and of what is at stake here. Let me now invite Payam Akhavan, who is our inaugural Human Rights Chair at Massey College. And I want to say this today is really part of our beginning of a partnership with having Payam as our Human Rights Chair at Massey College. So well known, he has a LLB from Osgood, LLM and SJD from Harvard Law School, a member of the Order of Ontario, and a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. He is also a member of the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague, associate member of the L'Institut de Droit International, special advisor on genocide to the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, serves as senior advisor to the Minister of Global Affairs of Canada, and member of the advisory panel on the Ukraine International Airlines flight PS 752 tragedy. Special Advisor to the Prosecutor General of Ukraine on International Crimes arising from the 2022 Russian invasion, Counsel to the Commission of Small Islands States on Climate Change, International and Honorary Canadian Co-Chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, and co-founder of the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center. Payam, we're so grateful for your leadership on this question, and we look forward to your remarks.
Distinguished guests, chers collègues, chers amis, bonjour, bienvenue. C'est un grand plaisir de vous accueillir. Welcome to Massey College, Lascaux, Roussillon. I'm honored to have been appointed as the inaugural chair in human rights by Principal Nathalie de Rosiers, and it is especially befitting that the first event sponsored by the chair is focused on war crimes against Ukrainian children. This partnership between civil society and the governments of Ukraine and Canada will hopefully open the way for further engagement in pursuit of justice in a world gripped by violence and injustice. I'm especially grateful to Alyssa Ginsberg of Massey College and Kimberly Lenz of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, who have worked very hard behind the scenes in collaboration with our friends and colleagues in Kiev and Ottawa to make this event possible. We're situated today at a critical historical juncture. One road leads to division, war, and atrocities that shock the conscience of humankind. The other leads to unity and justice based on respect for human rights and the rule of international law. There is sadly no shortage of violence in the world today. Yet Russia's invasion of Ukraine remains a unique challenge for the international community. It is plainly a war of aggression and a war aimed at extinguishing the sovereignty, indeed the very identity of an entire nation. It is a war aimed at territorial annexation, unprecedented in Europe since the Second World War. And it is a war in which the terrorization of civilians is a deliberate strategy rather than incidental to lawful military operations. All of these elements are compounded by the fact that Russia is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. We witness daily the unfolding of new horrors, only to forget those from yesterday. The headlines move on from one conflict to the next, and we sink ever deeper into compassion fatigue. Yet, international justice cannot be achieved without a long-term commitment. It is more accurate, perhaps, to say, in achieving international justice, that justice delayed is not justice denied, but justice delivered. Because the lesson that we have learned from the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, where I had the pleasure to serve, is that those who are in power today may not be in power tomorrow. Those of us assembled in The Hague would have scarcely imagined that one day the likes of Slobodan Milosevic, Radovan Karadzic, or Ratko Mladic would face justice in The Hague. Our approach towards Ukraine must be the same. We must have a long-term commitment to accountability. Notwithstanding these general observations, it should be remembered that this conference is focused on crimes against children. This includes in particular, as the Honorable Prosecutor General of Ukraine reminded us, the abduction of at least 20,000 children in a campaign of Russification. It calls to mind the kidnapping of Polish children by the Nazis for Germanization, as detailed in the trial of Ulrich Greifeld and others before the United States Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. The ICC arrest warrants against President Vladimir Putin and Maria Lvova, issued on March 17th of this year, qualified these acts as war crimes. In the context of a widespread or systematic attack against the civilian population, they could also qualify as crimes against humanity. and some would even argue that they qualify as genocide, as the biological destruction of a national group, especially where the forcible transfer of children is permanent. But however it is analyzed and categorized as a legal matter, what matters most is that those children are still alive, and that with relentless international pressure, it is still possible to return them to their homes where they belong. Justice, we learn, is a long and difficult journey, and the partnership between Ukraine and Canada is not without an important history. Following the shooting down of Ukraine International Airlines flight PS752 over the skies of Tehran on January 8, 2020, I had occasion to mourn the victims, both with fellow Iranian Canadians here in Toronto and with Ukrainians in Kiev at the Boryspil Airport Memorial. It was a moment for two nations to share grief, but also to express determination to pursue justice. Proceedings before the International Court of Justice against the Islamic Republic of Iran. It was an example of what can be achieved with unity and moral leadership. Now, this horrific war has brought our two nations together once again in pursuit of justice. I had occasion on March 31st of this year to commemorate the Bucha massacre in Ukraine and to meet some of the families who have lost their loved ones. It was a glimpse of the shocking cruelty that the Ukrainian people have been made to suffer. We cannot turn our backs on them. We cannot turn our backs against the children who are longing to return to their home. This conference then is about solidarity, standing together, united for justice. I express my deepest appreciation to the Prosecutor General's office, to the Ukraine Embassy in Ottawa, to the Government of Canada, and I'm very delighted to have two very dear friends, Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs and Attorney General with us today. And I express my deep appreciation to Massey College and the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights for having joined forces in this worthy cause. Once again, welcome and thank you for your support. Merci beaucoup and d'atouillou. I will now shift to the next portion of the program, which is the introductory remarks, and we will begin with the Honourable Foreign Minister of Canada, who I'm very pleased to introduce. The Honourable Mélanie Joly has been serving as the Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs since 2021. She was first elected to represent Arrondissement in the House of Commons in 2015. She has previously served as Minister of Economic Development, Minister of Tourism, Official Languages and La Francophonie, and Minister of Canadian Heritage. And I can tell you that it has been an extraordinary privilege to have collaborated with her, Madam Minister.
Thank you, Payam. It's a real pleasure to see all of you today, and thank you, Julia, for all the work you've put in. I know that you're a force, we all know this, but to make this happen today is a tribute to your leadership and the leadership of many people here. Of course, I'm happy to see my dear colleague, Arif. It's been a long time. It's been on the road, both of us. It's good to see you here, and good to see you later today, I guess, in Ottawa. Andriy, last time we saw each other was in Ukraine last February. It's good to see you here. I know you've been giving important speaking engagement, but what you're working on as Prosecutor General, particularly on the issue of children, is something that we can definitely continue to work together on. So thank you. Payam? Yes, you're there. Yes, I've talked to you, talked about you. Nathalie, ça me fait plaisir de te voir ici, ma chère Nathalie. Félicitations aussi pour ta nomination ici. And Irwin, I think, was on on the screen. I'll have the chance to talk to him later this week, but it's always great to see a great Canadian in such a important leadership position. Now, nearly 2 years since the start of Russia's illegal invasion, and it warms my heart to see that the support, the vigor, and the determination against the Russian regime has not fallen. Thank you for all your continued steadfast support of Ukraine. Only together as a community can we ensure that the Ukrainian people earn the justice they deserve. Now, in the context of Ukraine, over the last 20 months, the Ukrainian people have faced some of the worst crimes imaginable. You all see the brutality of Russia's attacks, the destruction it has caused, the families it has torn apart, and the lives it has forever changed. Prior to the invasion, Ukraine faced years of interference in their internal affairs, including an orchestrated campaign to undermine Ukraine's governance and democratic aspirations, the illegal invasion and annexation of the Crimea, and temporary occupations in eastern Ukraine. This is not just 2 years of invasion. This is a long history of intimidation by the hands of the Putin's regime. Despite all this, Ukraine, its people, and government have been resilient, defiant, and courageous in the face of all that has been thrown their way. Ukraine stands united, and the world stands united with Ukraine. Russia's war demands a sustained collective response rooted in accountability for those responsible for such immense suffering, displacement, and loss. As part of this process, Ukraine and Ukrainians must be compensated. This is why the individual stories of lives upended and forever changed must be at the forefront of our thoughts when discussing the war today. We must act urgently to seek justice and ensure accountability for Ukrainians from all walks of life. There can be no just and sustainable peace without accountability. Payam just spoke about it, and Andriy a bit earlier as well. Perhaps one of the most appalling crimes is that of the abductions and separations of thousands of Ukrainian children. Forcefully taken from their homes and families, these children have been deported to Russia or to temporarily occupied territories in Ukraine in an effort to erase the Ukrainian identity and lineage for generations to come. This flagrant violation of the rights of innocent children calls for our urgent attention. I am working closely with my international counterparts to find solutions that respect the fundamental rights of these children and protect their best interests. And today, I'm announcing that Canada and our allies will convene a network to help facilitate the safe return of children. Simply put, children are not to be used as pawns in this war, and the Russian regime will be held to account for their actions. This war has set new precedents when it comes to impunity. This means we must explore new ways to ensure justice and accountability. We'll continue to put pressure on the Russian regime and on those who have benefited from this illegal war. Canada is at the forefront of the G7 commitment to seize, forfeit, dispose, and redistribute the assets of sanctioned personnel. We are committed to doing this right, following the rule of law and ensuring procedural fairness and respecting international law. We have announced 2 seizures to date and are working to identify other assets in Canada. Canada is working with Ukraine and others to uphold the principles of international law, fairness, and justice for all. Today's gathering shows that our commitment has not wavered. There will be no impunity, and Russia will be held accountable. All the while, Ukrainians continue their brave resistance, and we reaffirm our commitment to stand with Ukraine as it defends itself, rebuilds, and lays the foundation for long-term peace. As mentioned, 7 counterparts and I reaffirmed earlier this month in Japan, our support for Ukraine will never falter. Merci à vous tous pour votre dévouement à ce que justice soit rendue. Faisons en sorte que la conférence d'aujourd'hui soit un catalyseur d'action et réaffirmons notre soutien inébranlable à la justice, l'instabilité et à une Ukraine souveraine et indépendante. Merci. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. I now have the honor to introduce the Honorable Arif, Virani, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, who was first elected as Member of Parliament for Parkdale Park also in 2015, and has been serving as the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada since July of 2023. He has previously served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade, Export, Promotion, Small Business and Economic Development, as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, and to the Minister of Democratic Institutions, as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage, Multiculturalism, and as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. And I'm proud to say that in addition to all those remarkable accomplishments, he was formerly a colleague of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. Welcome, Arif.
Hello, bonjour, dobrý. Merci beaucoup, Payam. It's quite something to be standing here before such an illustrious group. But I know many accolades have already been noted, but first of all to Irwin Cotler, who joined us, a person who I find not only to be an incredible Canadian, but also a useful mentor for somebody who's assumed the role that he had. But Payam, it is wonderful to be here with you, with 2 ambassadors, Ambassador Joly and Ambassador Andriy. Thank you for being here. Commissioner Reynders, senators, and so many distinguished guests. I guess it says something to you about the commitment that Canada has to Ukraine. We find not 1 but 2 cabinet ministers here playing cookie from our roles in Ottawa, but to demonstrate our real, symbolic, and vigorous commitment to Ukraine. And that's really, really, really critical. Je suis tellement content d'être ici parmi vous autres. Merci Nathalie pour l'invitation. Parce que c'est important et symbolique, et c'est pas juste une symbole d'être ici, parce que c'est nécessaire d'être ici, de démontrer d'une façon physique notre dévouement et notre responsabilité vis-à-vis Ukraine et les enfants d'Ukraine. This is a tremendous gathering, really testament to what Massey represents and what Massey does in terms of gathering thought leaders about pressing issues that are national and international in scope. And I appreciate what Payam said in terms of the first event that he involved in as chair, focusing in on issues that relate to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and allegations of genocide vis-a-vis the illegal conflict that Russia has perpetuated vis-a-vis Ukraine. It has particularly resonance for me personally. I am not just the Minister of Justice, but I'm also a Member of Parliament here in Toronto. I represent a Western Toronto riding that includes several thousand, approximately 7,000 to 10,000 Ukrainian Canadians who have been supporters, sometimes critics, but always tutors for me on issues that relate to Ukraine. And for their commitment and for their courage, I say a very sincere Didier. It is really, really critical in terms of what is going on always, and particularly what is going on at this moment in time. It also extends to my work as a parliamentarian. Some of the different roles that I've had. One of the ministers I worked with as parliamentary secretary is actually sitting here smiling right now. But all of the time she knew, among others in Ottawa, about my commitment to this cause, which was also informed by things like the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Friendship Group. When I see senators here like Senator Omidvar, who herself has been advancing the cause of Ukraine and the issue of Russia's illegal invasion in the upper chamber, I know that that is fundamentally a nonpartisan and a cross-parliamentary sort of initiative. I had the occasion to be on the Maidan in 2018, representing Canada, observing Canada's troops that were there at the time as part of Operation Unifier, doing training exercises with Ukrainian soldiers, sometimes providing that training in the Ukrainian language. So it's not just Christia that speaks Ukrainian, right? There's others that speak Ukrainian that are employing it all the time and using it to good measure. But I also remember at that time in 2018, we were talking about the original invasion, and we were talking about Crimea, and we were talking about the Donbass, and we were talking about the threat of a further incursion. Well, it's exactly that materialized in February of 2022 in terms of the further invasion that everyone dreaded has taken place. And that's why we really focus in on and double down on our commitment to the Ukrainian people, to Ukrainians on the ground in Ukraine right now, but also to the diaspora, or the Harmada, as Christy has explained it to me, as it exists here in Canada. But I think it's really critical also to underscore what we're talking about as children. And here I'm not talking to you as a member of parliament, I'm not talking to you as a minister, I'm talking to you as a father of two little boys. When you see international humanitarian crimes perpetuated against children, it is incumbent upon all of us to act with clarity, to act with speed, and to act with focus. And that is what this kind of discussion allows us to do today and on the go forward. And what I would say to you is that Canada stands firm in its commitment to ensure accountability for Russia's illegal and unjustifiable aggression in Ukraine. And I reiterate that commitment today on behalf of our government and as the person at our cabinet table tasked with promoting justice, the topic of today's conference. You heard Prime Minister Trudeau speak about this when he had and received President Zelensky here in Canada not so long ago. And that commitment is about the full sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And as many people say in Ottawa, and as I will say again, that it includes all of Ukraine. So that includes the Donbass, that includes Crimea. That is important to underscore. And we're working on multiple fronts to support justice, right? The topic of your conference is about supporting justice in Ukraine. My department, the Department of Justice, is working with our Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes section with Prosecutor Kostin. It is amazing to see you here today. Thank you. Again, Dushidyaku for your words. When I listened to your speech, I thought, well, that's a better calibration of what we've been doing in Canada than even I had in my notes. So thank you for the detail and alacrity. But Mélanie has given you one more thing to add, which is the working group about actually sourcing and finding and bringing back those children. But one of my earliest calls with Prosecutor Kostin was about this issue and about accountability, and I reiterated my commitment then. But my commitment also comes from a place that Payam mentioned, which is that much prior to politics, I was involved in work as a lawyer, and that work took me to the Rwandan Genocide Tribunal based in Tanzania, and it involved actually prosecuting war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. These are difficult things and the thresholds are high. That is as it should be as a matter of international law. But because the task is difficult, should not diminish our commitment or our unwavering determination to see the task through. Sometimes it takes time, as Payam said, but sometimes we can act with clarity now. And I think we can do both at the same time, which is really, really critical. What we are doing in terms of our war crimes unit is we are engaging in a structural investigation. We're collecting, preserving, and analyzing information and evidence from Ukrainians that are here in Canada, that have sought refuge here, as well as Canadians that were there during the conflict. Canada, as you know, has opened its hearts and its homes to almost 200,000 Ukrainians fleeing violence in their homeland. Those witnesses are coming forward with information and in some cases digital evidence. We note that similar evidence gathering exercises are being conducted by Ukraine and by other countries, by the ICC, international organizations, and NGOs. We are also aware critically of the risks inherent in conducting multiple investigations of the same context. We take those risks very seriously. What am I talking about? We don't want to have witnesses re-traumatized by having to over-document their crimes and provide their testimonies. To avoid those pitfalls, what Canada is doing is working on a cooperative manner to coordinate amongst all actors. This includes other investigating authorities, international organizations, NGOs, and civil society. So we're structuring our national investigation so that we can share information and evidence we're collecting with those other authorities. We're exploring ways to collect forensic evidence that can in turn be shared with these authorities. We'll continue to engage with civil society groups and non-governmental groups to ensure accountability. And this conference here at Massey, as I've said before, will provide an important forum to discuss how do we advance this very issue. Let me conclude by just simply saying this, that it is important to acknowledge the debt of gratitude we owe to all Ukrainians right now. As this war incredibly approaches its third year, the perseverance and bravery are an inspiration to all of us. That starts with President Zelensky and goes down to every man, woman, and child in Ukraine right now, and the members of the diaspora here in Canada who've demonstrated the same resilience and the same bravery. For those people, I commit to them my deep resolve to continue this work with Mélanie, with the Prime Minister, on behalf of the Government of Canada to ensure accountability. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Didier Reynders, the EU Commissioner for Justice and Competition. Didier Reynders is European Commissioner for Justice, responsible for rule of law, data protection, and other fundamental rights. And I had the privilege of meeting you previously at the first United for Justice conference in Lviv in March of this year. He has held this position since December of 2019, and since 5 September 2023, he has also been the European Commissioner for Competition. Previously, he held several high-level political positions in Belgium, including Minister of Justice, including Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade and European Affairs, Minister of Finance, and Deputy Prime Minister. Monsieur Didier, bienvenue.
Donc, bonjour tout d'abord, chers amis. Je voudrais remercier Madame de Rosiers et Monsieur Akhavan pour leur accueil ici au Massey College pour continuer à lutter ensemble contre l'impunité de tous les auteurs de tous les crimes de guerre à l'égard de toutes les victimes, et en particulier en Ukraine à l'égard des enfants. Dear Mr. Cotler, dear Andriy, we have had so many meetings together. Dear Ministers Virani and Joly, dear Ambassador Van Schaak, dear Beth, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you because we need to continue, I said, to work together. Russia's violations of international humanitarian law, which includes the systemic forced deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia, are completely unacceptable. It is therefore the responsibility of the international community as a whole to ensure that the victims, be it children or adults, can count on a response that is up to the task. In working towards achieving this goal, the European Union and its international partners have found in Ukraine a reliable and dedicated and forward-looking partner. While fighting a bitter war against an aggressor state, Ukraine has impressed us all by achieving substantial progress towards establishing an efficient regime of full accountability for the crimes committed on its territory. In conducting these efforts, the focus has been to cover the widest possible spectrum of international crimes committed during this war. This includes the crime of aggression and the crime of causing environmental damage during armed conflict. Ukraine's commitment to ensuring accountability has been met by strong support of the EU, which continues to closely cooperate with international partners, including G7 members such as Canada and the US. Let me use this opportunity to thank these partners for their strong commitment to uphold international criminal justice in these challenging times. When it comes to crimes committed against children, the central theme of this conference, the EU has been a committed participant in the Bring Kids Back Ukraine initiative. And we stand ready to further strengthen our cooperation with this initiative in the future. Furthermore, we are also a part of the group of friends on children and armed conflict in Ukraine, under the leadership of Poland and our host today, Canada. And when it comes to investigating war crimes more generally, we continue to work closely with the International Criminal Court, which remains the key international actor when it comes to upholding the international criminal justice system. It is for this reason that we have supported the ICC's invaluable work with over 9 million euros since the start of the war. The recent opening of field office in the ICC in Kiev on the 14th of September forms yet another example of the court's important role on the front in Ukraine, which I welcome. This field office will further strengthen ICC's investigative capacities on the ground, as well as the court cooperation with Ukrainian authorities. We also continue to encourage reflections on a possible amendment to the Rome Statute to yet further strengthen the ICC's competences, amongst others in respect to exercising jurisdiction over the crime of aggression in the future. Nevertheless, we must recognize that a gap exists in our current international criminal justice system, which prevents us from ensuring accountability for the murder of all crimes, the crime of aggression. It is for this specific reason that the European Union supports the establishment of a new accountability mechanism for the crime of aggression committed in and against Ukraine. To this end, the EU is driving discussions at the international level within the core group on the establishment of a special tribunal for the crime of aggression. To bring discussions forward, we are currently exploring preliminary elements of a potential third model for a dedicated tribunal based on the concept of transfer of proceedings from Ukraine to an international jurisdiction. I'm very happy to see that during the latest core group meeting in Berlin on 16th of November, members expressed openness to further reflect on such a model. Moving forward, the EU remains as committed as ever to supporting the future prosecution of the crime of aggression through any model that ultimately will receive the larger support of the international community. But our efforts do not stop here, with the EU already providing support in many ways to ensure that effective investigations can already be conducted now. Such investigations constitute an essential first step towards ensuring full accountability. In this regard, let me firstly mention the important role of Eurojust, the EU's agency for criminal justice cooperation. Since July, Eurojust has worked together with Ukraine and the other members of the joint investigation team within the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine. The ICPA brings together prosecutors from different participating countries. It enables them to exchange evidence quickly and coordinate shared strategies for investigation and prosecution. The EU and its international partners are committed to securing long-term funding for the ICPA. In this regard, I warmly welcome the $1 million financial support announced by the US State Department last week. Further contributions by other states in the future would only further strengthen the message that the ICPA is truly international in character. Alongside its work on the ICPA, the EU has also strengthened Eurojust's mandate, permitting it to store, analyze, and preserve relevant evidence. This has been made possible by the setting up of the core international crimes evidence database, which I'm pleased to say is now fully operational. Nevertheless, it is also important that we acknowledge that a large part of the international crimes committed during this war will ultimately have to be investigated and prosecuted in Ukraine. The EU will therefore continue to offer all the support it can to meet the Ukrainian authorities' immediate needs, including in their investigative and prosecutorial efforts. Let me in this regard highlight the invaluable work that has been done since the very start of this war by the Office of Prosecutor General Kostin. In order to strengthen the capacities of the Prosecutor's Office, we have already made available over 5.5 million euros in financial support to strengthen its work, and we remain in close contact to identify further ways by which to support the office going forward. Alongside international partners, we are also coordinating our support measures within the context of the dialogue group. In addition, the Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group between the US, UK, and EU, recently joined by Canada, has also been providing crucial assistance in the context of the investigations of Prosecutor General's office. In this regard, I welcome the multinational fund recently announced in the context of the Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group. These initiatives are all essential to ensuring accountability, and I expect all of our international partners to remain committed and further elaborate on these initiatives as the war persists and enters a new complicated phase. But let there be no mistake, the challenging situation on the battlefield should not prevent us from looking ahead and prepare the ground for Ukraine's future reconstruction. In this respect, holding Russia accountable must also include the payment of reparations. I want to take this opportunity to applaud the remarkable work of all those involved in establishing the Register of Damage at the Council of Europe. Their efforts have led to the creation of an important body which forms the first step towards a full compensation mechanism in record time. The EU and a majority of its member states have expressed their clear support from the very start, joining the register as founding members. It is vital to ensure that any damage, loss, or injury suffered by the people of Ukraine is securely recorded for the purpose of future determination of compensation. While the EU has joined the register as a founding associate member, we are envisaging changing the EU status to participant soon. Until then, our initial financial contribution of €1 million will be used to cover the startup cost of the register. But further steps are needed to ensure the register can live up to its full potential. First, outreach is essential to expand the register's membership. Second, we must work towards the establishment, through a separate international instrument, of a future international compensation mechanism. The EU stands ready to support Ukraine in these discussions, and we are encouraging member states as well as international partners to do the same. In this way, I'm convinced that we will, step by step, build a reparations system for Ukraine through which the effects of this war will be fully compensated. Making such a reparation system a reality also entails that we need to move forward with our efforts to ensure sufficient available funding for Ukraine's reconstruction. So far, more than €28 billion in Russian assets and more than €200 billion of Russian sovereign assets have been immobilized in the European Union. We are exploring ways to temporarily make use of the revenues accumulated by EU financial entities in their management of their assets. These revenues could in principle be allocated to the EU budget for supporting Ukraine's further reconstruction. In October, the European Council gave a clear mandate to the Commission and the High Representative to step up its efforts in this regard, and we are ready to deliver by soon, coming forward with a concrete proposal to bring discussions forward. But, of course, as with all aspects of our support for justice in Ukraine, this work must have the weight of the international community behind it. Cooperation with Canada and our international partners is therefore vital and is already taking place in different fora, including the WIPO task force. The statement issued by G7 finance ministers and central bank governors on the 12th of October expressed clear support for our discussions, and I want to thank Canada for its strong commitment in this regard. I understand reflections on the Canadian mechanism for the seizure and legal use of Russian assets are also ongoing, and I look forward to discussing these matters further with my counterparts present here today. We stand ready, of course, to further coordinate with you further measures to ensure Ukraine's reconstruction comes about as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, history has been unrelenting in teaching us a painful lesson. In prolonged conflict, it is the most vulnerable victims who pay the highest price. In repaying their extraordinary sacrifices, we must leave no stone unturned in our efforts to overcome the damage caused by this war. That means first and foremost ensuring accountability for those that have inflicted suffering upon the Ukrainian population by ensuring effective investigations into and prosecution of the perpetrators of international crimes. It also means ensuring financial support, among others, by making Russia pay for a prosperous European future for Ukraine and its citizens, including those that are at the heart of today's conference, the children of Ukraine. You know that we have published a report on the enlargement process of the European Union. Of course, the Ukrainian children will be a part of the European project in the future. So it's very important to have all the European children on board and so to take back children deported to Russia. Thank you very much for your participation today and your support in all the efforts that we try to do together to do two things. Je voudrais le redire à nouveau, pour amener tous les auteurs de crimes de guerre devant la justice et pour faire en sorte que la Russie paie pour les dommages causés par son agression à l'encontre de l'Ukraine. Slavia Ukraini.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Reynders. Dank u wel. Next is the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, who unfortunately could not be with us here in person today and has instead sent a recorded statement. Karim Khan, KC, is a barrister and Queen's Counsel, now King's Counsel, I should say, with more than 25 years of experience as an international criminal law and human rights lawyer. He took up the role of Chief Prosecutor of the ICC in 2021. Prior to that, he served as an Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and was the first special advisor and head of the UN investigative team to promote accountability for genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes committed by Daesh, ISIL in Iraq between 2018 to 2021. Now we will see the statement by the prosecutor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to express my very sincere gratitude to my dear friend Andriy Kostin, the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, to the Embassy of Ukraine in Canada, and to the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, as well as Massey College, for organizing this event. I was looking, in fact, at the program, and I'm particularly sorry not to be with you. The topic is exceptionally important, united for justice. In a time of uncertainty, it is the need of the hour that we are united for justice. And this being an important occasion, focusing on war crimes against Ukrainian children on this particular day, resonates very loudly. But I'm also additionally very sorry because I can't meet friends that I respect, that I look up to, and that are making such an important difference. I see Irwin Cotler, my dear friend, Alan Rock, your formidable Foreign Minister, Mélanie, Joly, who's present. And I'm not saying that only, Foreign Minister, because we need your funds in New York at the Assembly of State Parties, but it's very sincerely meant indeed. My special advisor, Professor Payam Akhavan, his own role, and then the indomitable and very wise, if I may say so, Didier Reynders. There's so many other fantastic people, Ambassador Beth Van Schak, Mark Ellis, Wayne Jordash, Ambassador Clint Williamson. The list really goes on. So I mean it when I say I'm sorry that I can't be with you. I was delighted and I was honored earlier this year to give the second Elie Wiesel lecture. And I came to Ottawa. Irwin, thank you so much for your support, and Alan Rock taking me around to speak to members of Parliament, for the support of the Foreign Minister of Canada, the Minister of Justice of Canada, and to speak about such a great human being, such a great example to us that is and was Elie Wiesel, and his legacy in redeeming humanity, his experiences as a Holocaust survivor, but filled not with anger, with resentment, with hate of the other, but in fact his love for justice, which is an example that we need to cling to and that needs to inspire us now. As I said in that speech, by stealing the words of that great man, Elie Wiesel, he said that a person who is indifferent to the suffering of others is complicit in crime. And that imperative, that truth, that uncomfortable truth of our collective responsibility not to be spectators to conflict, to think others will solve the problems of humanity, but we all have a voice, we all have a role, and we all have to feel more acutely the suffering of others as if it's the suffering, God forbid, of ourselves or our children or our loved ones. Because we are faced with a very stark moment in time. We are faced with awful statistics, but the statistics give a glimpse into an ugly reality that is a blight on us. That, according to some reports, in the last 2 decades, approximately 1 in 6 of the world's children, 1 in 6 of the children of the world live in situations of armed conflict. And right now, as we speak, children are suffering in Darfur, in Gaza, in Israel, and in Ukraine. And in these and so many other places around the world, the Rohingya in Cox's Bazar, the list goes on. We see that children are impacted, like adults, by violations of the rules of war, by the violations in relation to the conduct of hostilities, and actually by war itself. War itself causes massive suffering of children. In relation to situations for which the ICC has jurisdiction, we see in different parts of the world the most chilling accounts of children being tortured or sexually assaulted, enslaved or killed. We see trafficking and violations that really beg a belief. And there's an increased awareness that children suffer, even when they're not the specific targets of violence. So this, I think, this must be one of the goals of United for Justice, that every human life matters equally. This uncomfortable, this ugly, this unacceptable situation is one that we can't accept. It's one, as Elie Wiesel mentioned, we can't be indifferent to. And so, while media headlines continue to talk about children, we see the most ghastly images of children as the victims of war around the world. We have to make sure that those tears that we shed, those pictures, those horrendous pictures we see, are followed by concrete action. Children are our future, and children need to see that the law has an impact in their lives, that they're not invisible, and that the law can play a role with other actors, with other measures to protect the most vulnerable. And since I took over as prosecutor, since I assumed my responsibilities in June 2021, I promised that I would do my very best to elevate the voices and the experiences of children who have their own rights, who are rights holders, and are participants in the processes affecting them. The Rome Statute requires, it's actually a fundamental responsibility, that as prosecutor I give particular regard, not paying lip service, but particular regard to sexual violence, to gender violence, to violence against children in the officer's investigations. And I'm committed to establishing an institutional environment that facilitates effective investigation and prosecutions of crimes against children and crimes affecting children, and trying to do that by recruitment, by training, external collaboration, and by meaningful implementation, monitoring, and evaluation measures. And reflecting this priority for my office, this strategic priority, and considering developments in jurisprudence and research and practices, I'll be launching, God willing, at the forthcoming Assembly of State Parties in New York, a brand new policy paper on children. It's not a rewrite. It's not a revision. It's a fundamentally new document. And that renewal effort builds upon extensive consultations and partners from government, from state parties and non-state parties, with international organizations, from academic experts, from civil societies. I've held with my deputies, with the wonderful work of Veronique Aubert or Kim Seelinger, the deputy prosecutor, with the men and women of my office. We've engaged with civil society in Geneva, in Bellagio, really around the world. We've brought people from all affected communities, from many affected communities, whether it's the Rohingya or whether it's from Palestine or whether it's from Ukraine, to meet with us, to hear their voices, to make sure we can do better and make sure the policy doesn't adorn our bookshelves, but is a policy that makes us do better and that makes its effect felt in the investigations and prosecutions that we bring before the judges of the ICC. I believe that the focus of this policy paper, the obvious realization that children can be affected by all Rome Statute crimes as much as anybody else, will help remedy a historic underrepresentation and lack of engagement of children in international criminal justice processes. It will ensure that in all my dealings relating to children, my office takes a child's rights, a child-sensitive, a child-competent approach, guided by the best interests of the child and the need to make sure the voices of children are heard by judges in terms of criminal investigations and prosecutions. I think very shortly, very succinctly perhaps, it can be best put that my office commits to seeing children, seeing them in their entirety, in their diversity, and hearing their voices in all our cases. So their experiences, their lived experiences, how they are affected, what they think, are considered at all stages of our work. Now, unfortunately, we see the plight of children very starkly in Ukraine. You have Andriy Kostin before you. He has spoken to the families of those that are missing their children. He has seen the effects of conflict. But even before we launched our renewed policy on children next month, we have made headway in implementing the approach that will find form in this new policy in various situations in which we work. I think very prominently perhaps and quite visibly, this has found form in the charges that the application that we lodged with the pre-trial judges of the ICC and the warrants those judges issued relating to President Putin and Madam Lvova-Belova in relation to the allegations, the charges of unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children from occupied areas of Ukraine into the Russian Federation. And the effect of these crimes can't be underestimated. Imagine if our own children are ripped from our homes, are disappeared, are being fed by somebody else, taught in a foreign language. You don't know how they're being kept. One doesn't know how they're feeling. How would we sleep? Every living moment would be hell on earth. And yet that reality isn't fiction of some ghoulish nightmare. It is actually felt by so many Ukrainians as we speak. I've seen that reality. I've seen glimpses of that reality when I went to Ukraine and I went to the front line. There were drones overhead and we went to the one home. And I saw cribs after cribs, cots that were empty, beds with clothes, little socks, little shoes, trousers neatly folded and pictures on the wall of birthday parties and Christmas people in fancy dress, and yet it was still almost a haunting experience that children had vanished, because they had. The accounts of those that we've spoken to that have cared for those children, the fears that they have, that their parents have, that their loved ones have, that their wards, those looking after them had, has to be underlined, and it has to compel urgent action. We're trying to move forward across all areas of activity, but we need this constant support, not for the office by itself, but as the essential requirement of our humanity that we partner. We are united for justice. We must ensure that those responsible for alleged crimes are held accountable, and that those children are returned to their families without delay, that they're returned to their communities, to the homes, to the streets that they knew so well, to the playgrounds that they used to play in, to the schools that they went to. We can't allow children to be treated as the spoils of war anywhere in the world. We continue to move forward rapidly in the collection of more evidence in relation to this and also other lines of investigation into various incidents and areas of criminality affecting Ukraine. With the assistance of our partners, most importantly, in fact, Prosecutor General Andriy, Kostin, the authorities in Ukraine, the ministries involved, we have had excellent support, and we enjoy a very productive cooperation with them, maintaining our independence but working in partnership. Canada has much to be proud of, because the Canadian support has been a constant, and it also is required for us to continue to show the stamina that every human life matters equally. Those funds, those supports, those expertise that have been lent to my office have been absolutely essential to move to where we are, and they remain essential to continue to reach the destination of justice that we must collectively arrive at. We have to make every effort to bring our work closer to the communities. We have our office in Kyiv that is fully functioning. We're working with the various partners, whether it's JITS, whether it's the Ukrainian authorities, whether it's other national partners. We're drawing on a whole panoply of advanced technological tools that are integrated, and we're building a variety of innovative partnerships to support our work. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference, as I alluded to at the outset, is on an important day. It's on World Children's Day. It's a moment to pause and to think about the children missing that have been taken from Ukraine, as is alleged. It's an occasion to come together and realize around the world children far too frequently are in miserable states of uncertainty and conflict. It's an occasion to solidify our awareness and our joint actions to do justice for children and to improve their situation as a result of the conflicts we see around the world, and that justice must be done regardless of the nationality, the gender, and the religion of any individual, and regardless of the age of the person that is affected or targeted. I always find it sobering and moving and awful to think that these are our children. If we think of these not as numbers or abstract beings, but think these are our children who have hopes, who have dreams, who are happy, who are sad, who go to school, who play sports, who enjoy running up to their parents or their grandparents and giving them a hug. We would not tolerate the situation of heartbreak that we see in Ukraine and that we see around the world when it comes to humanity and particularly children. How we treat our children must define us as a species. We must not allow ourselves to turn our faces away. We have an obligation to look at that ugly reality and change it, to try to change it, to not give up, that the world that we leave to our children can be better than this world that is faced by so many of its children. It's upon us collectively to ensure we meet children's rightful demands for accountability. We must remain united for justice. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Prosecutor General, Irwin, Payam, and all colleagues for giving your time. I'm sorry I can't be with you physically, but we are together in spirit. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank all of the speakers who've made introductory remarks. For those of you joining us online, we will return in about half an hour at 11 for the first panel. Now, for those of you who are in person, we will now have a very short video, after which we will have a break.